Do you dream of adding your very own book to the collection of books that have already been written? Do you wonder where to start or how to finish? Does the idea of writing a book seem too overwhelming? Do you just want to polish up those writing skills or stay motivated? Do you wonder what to write about? Everything you need to help you write, stay motivated, and self-publish your own book is right here on one channel. And why? Well, because it's time to get over the writer's hump and just do it. You can write anything. Yep, you can write a book. Hello, and welcome to another great episode of A Book. I'm so thrilled that you are here. Again, we have a great author for you to hear from today. His name is Randall Nicholson, and he's going to be speaking to you today about the writing process and about his book. And we're just going to sit back and have a good time. But before we go any further, I want to talk to you a little bit about liking and subscribing to this channel. When you subscribe to this channel, it helps our authors out. So make sure you're doing that. Go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button below. And without further ado, we are going to get started. Christopher, welcome to today's show. I'm happy you're here.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yes, I'm so thrilled. So we scheduled this interview couple of months ago, I believe, but you're here today, and we are going to have a fantastic conversation about you and your book and the writing process. I know that you are a brand new author, and I want to give you an opportunity to let our audience know something about you. One thing that everybody knows is that when authors have a chance to talk about themselves and people get to know them, then they feel like they know more about the book itself. So I want to give you that opportunity to tell our audience about yourself.
All right. Well, I was born in Utah, and then my family moved to New York when I was a baby. I grew up in northern New York, up by the Canadian border, a little town called Fort Jackson. So it was like nothing like the city. It was really rural, a lot of cows and deer and trees and rivers. And it was pretty, but there was nothing to do, and there's like no job, so I wouldn't go back and live there again. But I came out to Utah State University for college. And I've wanted to be a writer for my whole life, but I thought like majoring in English would not be practical. So I majored in wildlife science. I was like, I'll just like do that for a career, and then I'll try to write on the side. And then um, eventually I changed because well, I went into wildlife science because I like animals, but I found out that I don't like doing science. I like reading about science, but I don't like doing it. So I got kind of miserable. And so eventually I was like, I need to just do what I'm passionate about, even if I'm going to be poor. So I switched to English with a creative writing emphasis and got a degree in that. And then I wanted to be done with school, but I had a professor who convinced me to go back and get a master's because he was like, you have a lot of potential. I want to make sure it goes somewhere. And so I went and did that. And then he tried to get me to do a PhD too. And I was like, no, but now I'm thinking about it again. So
Are you? Okay. So you've always wanted to be a writer.
yeah, I just always liked using my imagination and telling stories, I guess. Like when I was really little and I didn't know how to write yet, I drew pictures that had stories to go with them. And
Oh, how
then,
fun.
yeah.
So, well, let me ask you this then. Are you using that master's degree in English besides writing your books? I'm talking about writing for yourself personally. Like, do you have a job in that field where you're using that degree?
No, not right now. So I was teaching at the university while I got my degree to like as a lecturer to help pay for it, and then I wanted to keep doing something like that. But I haven't been able to get another job doing that right now. Right now, I was substitute teaching, which is because it's still like teaching related, but obviously not as good. And then just recently, I started doing a freelance job training AI chatbots, which is mostly like evaluating the responses for accuracy and coherence and stuff. So that uses more of my writing skills, at least.
That's very interesting that you would mention that because last week, one of our last episodes that we did, we talked about AI and whether or not AI is a good tool for writers. And so we talked about the fact that that is a language-based model. and a very sophisticated language-based model. So it would make sense that somebody with a master's degree would kind of be checking over that to make sure that it understands prompts correctly and is responding correctly. It's very fascinating. All
Yeah.
right, so you went to school and majored in English, and still considering going back to do that. We'll see if that happens or not. But when did you finally decide now is the time that I'm going to start writing this novel? When did you do that?
When did I start?
Yeah.
It was like, well, it was all the way back in high school in 2010. And it wasn't like the first time I started one. I like over the years I've started a whole bunch of like book ideas and then gotten a few pages or a few chapters and kind of given up, got bored of them and moved on. So this was just one of those, and I gave up on it after a few pages. But then I came home for winter break during college and found it on the computer and started working on it again, and then eventually it got finished. I don't know if you want to hear the whole story of that right
Yeah,
now.
yeah. Tell us, how long did it take you to write this?
So it was in 2010 that I started it, and it was then I had like I think like 3 pages, and then it was 2011 when I started working on it again. Um, and I kind of worked on it off and on, and then summer of 2013 I had it like finished, like it was full story beginning to end. But then over the years I would go back to it and revise it and make it better, which I'm glad about that because it's like way better now than it was 10 years ago. But I was always like, I want to get this published eventually, but I'm afraid that I'll publish it and then I'll think of ways that I could have made it better and I'll regret
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, I think so many people sit on a manuscript because they're waiting for it to be perfect. And I always say there is no such thing as a perfect manuscript. There really just isn't. I mean, every manuscript has something about it that I think most writers go, "Oh, I should have done that a little bit different, or I should have been a little bit more clear or more descriptive in this part of it or that part." I think that's what sequels are for. Are you considering writing a sequel?
Yeah. Well, so first I want to do like a series of short stories that are prequels that each focuses on one of the characters because theoretically that'll be easier. But yeah, eventually I want to do a sequel novel.
Yeah, so okay, so you essentially had this manuscript for a very long time that you worked on. You said about 10 years you worked on it. And what was the deciding factor? When did you say, okay, this is just going to have to be good enough. I'm going to pull the trigger and get this thing published. What made you decide that?
Yeah, well, it was actually because I was having trouble with the job search because like I didn't like being a substitute teacher and I was getting frustrated with all applying to all these jobs and not getting anywhere. And it kind of, I guess, was a hidden blessing because it kind of motivated me to like do this other stuff, like this writing stuff that I've been procrastinating on, like getting published. And I started like I didn't really have a good strategy. I just kind of like jumped into it because had like these short stories I wrote for college. So I started just like publishing those on Amazon for 99 cents each because I just so I'd have like stuff out there. Like I didn't expect to get rich off of those or anything, but
Yeah.
and, and then I um set a deadline of December of last year. I was like, by the end of the year, I want to publish the novel. Just have to like set a deadline and say it's good enough.
And that was it. That was the deciding factor. So it sounds like to me that you made the decision to become a writer as an opportunity for a career, that you want to do this as a profession.
Yeah, I think so. I don't know what the chances are of that, but
Yeah.
I'm going to do it a lot.
So that's interesting because I think a lot of people, everybody's motivation is so different when it comes to writing, right? Like I wasn't like you. I wasn't somebody who always wanted to be a writer. I was completely different. And writing was something that I was good at and I enjoyed, but the thought of being an author wasn't on my radar until one of my business coaches, I was a life coach at the time, and my business coach said, you need to have a book if you want more speaking engagements. So I wrote a really stupid book and um, it wasn't very good. I didn't sit around waiting for it to be perfect. I just wanted to get it out there so that I would be able to get more speaking engagements. And like I said, that just wasn't a dream of mine to be a writer. But once I got that book and I looked at it and I said, hey, I was one of those people who said, I really could have done a lot better job. I think next time I'll do better. But it was so thrilling. It was thrilling to be able to say that I had something published. And so it motivated me to keep on writing. And I'm finishing up my ninth book. My eighth one should have been done last month, but I got overwhelmed with other stuff and didn't get it finished. So I'm still trying to finish that up. And then my ninth one's already in progress as well. So yeah, it's interesting how each of us is motivated for different reasons to write. And so then for some people, they write because they just had a fun story they wanted to do, and it does end up being something that they start to earn a living with. For other people, they write and it goes nowhere. So it really just is all about marketing and those types of things. But yeah, okay, so you got the book published, right? In December of 23?
Yeah.
Okay. Tell us about that process. Did you self-published?
Yeah. Because when I got to thinking about that, I just wanted to get it over with. I didn't want to like spend months or years like getting rejection letters and then if somebody
Mhm.
accepted it, having to like argue about the changes that they'd want to make and stuff. So maybe I'm just stubborn because I was like, this is my book, and I'm like, like I hope that other people will like it, obviously. And I did have like friends look at it and give suggestions and stuff, but mostly I just like wrote something that I like, so I don't want some editor telling me how to change it and everything. So um, yeah.
Yeah, well, I am a huge proponent of self-publishing, and we talk a lot about that on the channel. I'm not saying that there aren't reasons and causes for people to go the quote unquote traditional publishing route, but we no longer live in the day and age where people have to ask permission to get a book published. It used to be that people would pour their hearts out into a manuscript, send it off to several different places, and then sit back and hope and pray that one of those publishing places would accept their manuscript and they would actually become a published author. But now, in the wonderful day and age of self-publishing, anybody can write a book. And I'm a real advocate for that because what I believe is that there are people out there with wonderful stories, wonderful messages who deserve to be heard. And in order to get out there, sometimes they need to just go ahead and self-publish. I'm also a big fan of that because you said it yourself. It's one of the cheaper ways to go ahead and do things. Certainly with Amazon and Ingram Sparks and some of the other ways that people can get their books out there with for no cost. So yeah, that's pretty awesome. What was it like when you held your book for the first time?
I don't know, kind of like mixed feelings of like pride and embarrassment. It's weird.
Really? Yeah.
Like I'm like proud of my accomplishment that I'm also, but I'm also like as soon as I put it out there, I'm like before I publish it, I'm like, oh, this is great. I'm so happy. And then put it out, I'm like, oh, this is terrible. I'm embarrassed.
Yeah, well, you have nothing to be embarrassed about. I've seen your book, and I don't think you have anything to be embarrassed about, but I certainly identify with that feeling. You know, I think that most writers go through that. They're so excited when they get that book in their hands. Like, I did that. I have this accomplishment. I get to share this with the world. And then that dreaded, uh-oh, what if the world doesn't like it? But what we have to do as writers is just understand that we write these stories because we are passionate about them and know we have to know going into this, I think, all new writers, that not everybody is going to like your book. There will be people out there who don't like it. Just like when I read a book, I may love it, and you could read the same book and say, I didn't like that one. So different strokes for different folks. And the thing is, you did it and you got it out there, and that's the most important thing. What was the hardest part besides publishing? I'm talking about your writing process itself. What was the hardest part for you in writing this book?
I guess just being motivated to finish it all the way because like I said, I started so many books that I just gave up on. I think because when I start out with like just a blank document, I'm like I have to write a few hundred pages, super intimidating. I just kind of had to. I'm not even sure like how I managed to do it this time and not the other times, but just eventually after I wrote enough, I passed like a threshold, I guess, where it got easier because I didn't have as much left to do, if that makes sense.
It
But
does. And as you
so
got closer to the end, did you find yourself being even more motivated because you're like, I'm so close. I just want to get to that finish line.
yeah. And I wrote some parts of it out of order, and I think that helped. Like I wrote the ending before I was finished with the whole thing, and then I had something to work toward,
I'm
kind
so
of.
glad that you said that. I've asked different writers this question before. So I always start with the ending in mind. Like I always know how I want my books to end, and it motivates me to get there. So I love that you said that because almost everybody that I've talked to says, "Well, I have a vague idea of, the storyline and where I'm going, but for me, it'd be easier to write that last chapter so I know how to get there." So I like that you said that. That's really cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
so that kept you motivated. So that writer's block, that's a tough thing to overcome sometimes.
Yeah. And I'm still struggling with that now when I'm working on like the short stories that I want to do.
That
I thought
writer's block.
it would just maybe to get easier, but still have to. It's just because I like start writing and I'm like, this is garbage, and then I don't want to keep going because it's garbage. But I know you have to be willing to write garbage sometimes, and then you have something to revise.
Yeah, that editing process. You said that you had some friends check your work over. And I always say it's a very important thing to get other people to look at your work because sometimes we go blind to our own mistakes and we don't catch certain punctuation or spelling errors, not because we don't know the process, but because we just don't see it. And sometimes what makes sense to us in the story doesn't necessarily make sense to the reader. And having somebody else look at that and say, hey, Christopher, what did you mean here? Can be very helpful. You say, oh, well, let me explain that a little bit better so that the next reader understands it more as well. So, yeah, I think it's a very brilliant thing that you did, making sure that other people looked over it. My first book, I didn't have anybody look over. I didn't know I was supposed to do that. And it's complete garbage. It's terrible. It's like the first pancake. The first book sometimes doesn't always come out the best. But well, I applaud you for continuing to write, even though you have, that writer's block kind of going on sometimes. But yeah, it can be a very challenging process. Well, tell us just briefly, I don't want you to give the entire book away because we are going to show the book to the audience, but tell us a little bit about it, the title of the book, and just kind of a thumbnail sketch of what the book's about.
Okay. It's called Crusaders of the Chrono-Crystal. And basically it's kind of like the basic general idea that I started with was it's like Indiana Jones in space. So that's kind of why I know the title's kind of goofy, but it's just supposed to be like evocative of this like adventure that's not like super serious.
Yeah.
But
So it's a kind of a sci-fi fantasy then, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
like
okay.
it's like set in the real world, like in the future with space travel and stuff, but it revolves around like a magic artifact.
Okay. All right. And we're going to take a look at that book later on. So, and you'll want to stick around for that because we are going to show you Christopher's book. But before we get to that, Christopher, we do need to take a break, and we're gonna go hear from our sponsor, Victory Vision Publishing, and we'll be back in just a moment. Hey everyone, are you stuck trying to figure out how to finish writing or publishing your book? Well, let me tell you about Victory Vision Publishing. Victory Vision Publishing is there to help you cross that finish line. They have package plans that are tailor-made just for your individual needs. They have learning opportunities where you can discover ways of overcoming some obstacles that you might have. Adam Fleming is a wonderful CEO, and they are a fully staffed team just waiting to help you edit, layout, maybe make a cover for your book. Go ahead and join their email list and check out some of the wonderful books and wonderful authors that they have already helped get published. Yep, Victory Vision is definitely the way to go if you feel stuck and just want some support in getting your book out to the world. You're only one book away
from changing the world. victoryvision.org.
Okay, we are back and we have been talking with Christopher Nicholson, and Christopher is the author of a wonderful book that I know you're going to be interested in. Christopher, you were telling us a little bit about your book and the story before we went on break, and I want to pull that up onto the screen for our audience to take a look at. So this is Crusaders of the Chrono-Crystal. And you can find this book on Amazon. As always, we'll make sure and leave the link to Christopher's book in the description of this video. But so yeah, tell us a little bit more about the story.
Yeah, so it's set in the future. There's a couple of space adventurers. They're just partners. They just go around doing like different kinds of missions, like whatever people hire them to do. And they get hired to find this magic crystal hidden in a temple on a planet in the jungle. And they don't believe in the crystal's magic, but obviously it is magic because if it wasn't, there wouldn't be much of a story. So that's not really a spoiler, but and it just transports people through time and space. So the bad guys want to use it to rewrite history so they could take over the galaxy, basically.
Okay. All right. Well, pretty cool. When you decided you were going to self-publish, did you hire somebody to make the cover for you, or is that something you did on your own?
Yeah, I definitely couldn't do that on my own. So
Okay.
yeah, I had a friend who did a Star Wars podcast, and she knew this guy who did some art for her.
Oh,
So
okay.
I talked to him, and then he gave me a discount because I knew her. So
Okay, awesome. So you had somebody do it. I think cover creation can be really, for some people, it's the hardest part, especially if you're not a graphic artist. But anyway, you will want to go check out Christopher's book, Crusaders of the Chrono-Crystal, and you'll want to find that on Amazon, and that's by C. Randall Nicholson. So you'll want to make sure that you're searching for the correct author there. Again, we're going to leave that link in the description. So, Christopher, I want to talk to you just a moment about your actual writing process. When you sit down to write, and I know you said this book took you several years to complete, are you somebody who sets a goal? I'm going to write 200 words today, or I'm going to write 2 pages, or whatever that might be. Or do you just sit down and write until you're out of ideas and have to replenish those ideas?
I usually just kind of until I'm out of ideas, I guess.
Hmm.
Usually like I know I'm not very good at like goal setting and scheduling and stuff. So I kind of sometimes just squeeze it in whatever time I have left after doing other stuff. Um, a lot of times it ends up being like before bed, but then I have to I can't stay up writing too late because then I can't sleep because then my mind is racing.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so you write when you can and with whatever inspiration you have at the time, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of my process as well. That's sort of how I do things. I know that there are plenty of writers who set goals and deadlines and all of that. And I don't do well with that because then what I find is that I am forcing the story to come instead of just letting it come. So I am one of these people though who binge writes. I will sit down at my computer and start, and when the thoughts are coming, boy, I just keep going and going and going. And then maybe 3 or 4 hours later, I'm looking up going, I haven't had anything to eat today. Maybe I should take a break. So I have a tendency to do that. And when a part of the story is like really bubbling in my mind, I can't wait to get to the computer and get it out. And I have to do the whole thing. Or then when I go back later, it's like, now what was I talking about? So how did you keep track of, because there was so much time that went in between your writing, how did you keep track of all of your characters? Did you have an outline or a list of characters?
I don't know. I felt like when I went back through the whole thing to edit after, of course I found like continuity errors with like events and stuff, but I felt like the characters were easy to keep track of because I guess they're just like my children. I'm like I made them, so of course I know who they are and their names and everything. But um
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. That's a really good question. When you finished the book, did you miss the characters? They do, but they become a part of you. Did you miss them?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll have to use them again, at least the ones that are still alive. But
Oh, well, no spoiler alerts, but yeah, for sure. That's great. I love that. So I know that I was helping a friend of mine write one of her last novels, and I got so invested in that when it ended, I kind of missed the characters. And that wasn't even my writing, that was hers. So I've been telling her she needs to write a sequel. I don't think she's going to, but I think she should for that very reason. So if you miss the characters, there's a good chance that the reader will miss the characters as well. And you said you've thought about writing a sequel. Do you plan on it taking as long for the next one to come out as the first one did?
no, I'll have to well, hopefully, I was gonna say I'll have to lower my standards and not like spend as long on it, but hopefully it won't take as long in the first place now that I've had more experience and more education than when I started this one, but
Yeah.
just
Hey,
need the motivation.
you talk about experience and all of that. I do have a question for you. The process of getting your book up on Amazon, for me, that was a huge learning curve, and it is for so many authors. Hours of scouring YouTube videos on how to get my book on Amazon and going through KDP and trying to figure out all of their templates. And the whole process was a little bit um, encumbersome. How did you approach that? Was that a pretty easy process for you, or was there a lot to learn?
Um, Most of it was easy except for getting the covers scaled exactly right for the print version. That was pretty awful. Because like I submitted those and then they came back rejected because they were the wrong size or whatever. So I had to I don't know, I just kept messing with the templates and trying again. I don't even have a strategy that I use because basically I just kept trying until they didn't reject them anymore. But that was awful.
Yeah, yeah, it really is. And so as much as we all love Amazon for our books, is because I don't know anybody whose book isn't on Amazon. Anybody who's anybody has their book on Amazon or with Ingram Sparks or Barnes and Noble, some place that's reputable that everybody knows about. But what I will say is for a company that that is so big on publishing books. KDP is a dinosaur. That's my opinion. I'm just going to throw it out there. If you're listening, KDP, we're talking to you. It is very hard to use. It's not as user friendly as it initially appears. And I get it. They reject those things because it won't look good when it's finally printed. But it's also very limited in its abilities. At least that's what I think. What do you think about that?
Yeah, are you just talking specifically about the print versions or the
Yeah,
whole
yeah,
thing?
yeah. Well, I do feel like they do a great job with their e-reader stuff, but the print version is it's tough. It's tough to get it up there.
Yeah, and I didn't understand all the terminal they have the templates with the dotted lines and everything, and I don't understand
Yes.
what do these lines mean and what do these words mean.
Yes, exactly. So it's not, I mean, you almost have to just I don't know. I don't know. It's just not as user friendly as I wish it was. I wish they made it simpler. But there are programs out there that you can get that will format your book for you. There are companies you can use. There are people that you can use that will format your book. I know, for example, Victory Vision, they will do that. They'll format books for people. And so there's ways of doing that so that you get this manuscript that when you go to upload it to Amazon, it's easy. Everything's done. It's simple and you don't have to fight with it. I had one book that took me, I think, a week to get uploaded properly. And, I fought with it and fought with it and eventually was able to get a live person in their customer service. It's been a few years who said, oh, you just need to do blah, blah, blah. And I can't remember. I think I was using the wrong browser or something. It was something so simple. And they got it fixed for me in just a matter of minutes. And finally, I got that stupid thing uploaded. But yeah, it can be a little bit of a dinosaur, I think. That's just my opinion. So, what did you learn through that process for next time?
Well, next time I'll start the KDP process more in advance. I can
Yeah.
because I had a date when I wanted to publish it and I should have done more research ahead of time about the process because I kind of just was oh, it'll be simple. Well, and I'd already published some short stories just as little ebooks And so I knew that part was simple, but I wasn't thinking about like the complications of actually printing stuff. So
Yeah. 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 With the bleed and the no bleed. And it was like, what is all of this? So yeah, there was a lot that I learned as well. But all right. Well, we're going to show your book again. I want the audience to see this. This is the Crusaders of the Chrono-Crystal, and you can get this either on Kindle, hardcover, or paperback. And we've been talking to Christopher Nicholson today. He is the author of this book. We're going to make sure that we leave the link in the description for you so that you can go get your own copy. Well, I have another question for you, Christopher. If you were going to give advice, just one piece of advice to a brand new writer out there who's watching this and thinking, well, I want to write. I want to be an author. I want to get my book published. And maybe they're having some doubts about all of that. What would you say to them?
just one piece of advice.
Sure. One or
Um,
two, I don't care how many. What would you say to them?
I guess the first piece would be like you just have to start writing. Like I said, even if it's garbage. Because if you just like think about wanting to do it someday, then someday will probably never come. So you just have to like get started. And then I'm allowed to give one more piece of advice or
Sure, yeah. We want to
so
know
then,
your thoughts.
yeah, well, and then the other piece of advice was like just like get help, whether that's like taking writing classes or just like joining a writing group or just having other people look at it. Because I think pretty much anybody can be a writer, but of course you still need to have some knowledge about like good writing practice and stuff if you want to write something that'll actually be like a good coherent story that people want to read.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. So you touched on something interesting. You said join a writers group or, have somebody else look at it. I think, and this is my own personal opinion, I think being part of writers groups is a very good thing because writing is such a lonely endeavor, at least it is for me. And having a group of people that you trust, I'm not talking about people who are going to just pick you apart and criticize you for no good reason other than they just want to be superior. But having another group of writers who are all trying to accomplish goals and they can sort of help each other, I think is such a valuable thing, is such a beautiful process. And it's been my experience that writers are typically very generous with their knowledge and their insight and their input. So I know that your education happened to be in English, so that made it a little bit easier for you, but were you part of any writing groups when you were writing?
So I just joined one a couple months ago just to help because like while I was in school, I had classes that I was writing stories for, and we would like give each other feedback and stuff.
Mm.
And of course, there were the deadlines. And then just recently, I was kind of thinking that would be helpful to have like deadlines again because I was struggling with motivation, like writing the stories that I'm working on now. So now, like if I go to the writing group and tell them that I'll share my story with them, then I have to finish it. So that's helpful.
Yeah, that accountability. That's the other thing that I think writers groups are good for is just that accountability. And certainly not everybody lives in an area where they can meet up with other writers because there are no writers clubs or groups in their area. But there's so much online now that is available. So many writers groups online that people can join. And I think that's how you and I actually met each other was through a writers group online, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, a lot of things that people can do. All right. Well, what has been the most helpful piece of advice that you have gotten along this journey? Did you
That's
watch a
just
lot
like,
of like how-to videos or anything like that? Or was it just maybe you were somebody who didn't need a lot of advice because you do have that background with your education, I think. So I don't know.
yeah, it's just hard to think of like the one specific thing that's the most helpful, except for like, I don't know, just general encouragement count, like just people telling me
Oh,
that I'm good at
general
writing.
encouragement counts a whole lot. Yeah.
Yeah, because I
Yeah.
feel like that, because that's something that I had from like my teachers and all the way back in elementary school and like peers. So just like people telling me that my writing is good helps me want to
Yeah.
keep doing it.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah. And so on that note, I want everybody to make sure that they are going and checking out Christopher's book because Christopher does have the writing skills. He knows how to write, and you'll want to read this. It's going to be a captivating story for you. You'll enjoy it, I'm sure. So the feedback I'm taking from your book, for the most part, has been very positive then.
Yeah.
That's great. That is awesome.
Mm.
Christopher, it has been a delight to have you here with me today. I'm glad that you were willing to join me and talk about your book. I'm going to bring that up on the screen one more time for everybody. And then we're going to let you folks go. But this, again, is Christopher's book. This is Crusaders of the Chrono-Crystal. And you can find that on Amazon. You can get it in Kindle, paperback, or hardcover. And we'll leave the link of that in the description for you. Well, Christopher, do you have any last parting words for our guests today? Anything you want them to know about your book that we haven't covered?
It's funny. I don't know if they'll be expecting that, but I like to try to write funny things.
Put
I
some
don't
humor
like,
in there.
yeah, I don't like telling people that I'm funny, but I know the book is funny because I had people tell me it's funny. So
Oh, that's awesome. I love humorous stuff. I do. I like putting humor in my writing, and I like to read something that has some humor to it. So I'm looking forward to that book. Well, thank you so much for being here with us today, Christopher. I truly appreciate it. For everybody who's been watching or listening today, I want to thank you for joining us on a book. And please go check out Christopher's book. You'll want to find that on Amazon. We're going to leave that link for you. As always, thank you for watching, and God bless.